This is One on One, and I'm Stacey Carmichael. I'm joined by the Honorable Ronald Bulkan, Minister of Communities, and today we'll be discussing developments in the sector. Good afternoon, Minister. It's a pleasure having you on One on One.
It's my pleasure to be here, Stacey.
Okay, great. Now let's get right into it. You have responsibility for several areas, including water, housing, regional development. Let's start with the water sector. What are some of the developments, achievements in this sector for 2019, and going forward?
Yeah. Well, if I may, Stacey, you're correct. I do have responsibility, but of course, the ministry is a lot more than me. Since my appointment in May 2015, following those historic general and regional elections, I have been ably assisted in the ministry, firstly with two junior ministers, namely Minister Don Hastings Williams and Minister Keith Scott. They were succeeded by Minister Valerie Yearwood, and then more latterly Minister Annette Ferguson. And formerly, the junior ministers or the ministers within the ministry had sort of responsibility for water and housing, but with the departure or the loss of Ministers Keith Scott and then Don Hastings, I'm now, Minister Annette Ferguson has principal responsibility for the housing sector and the delivery of the housing program. If I may as well, Stacey, the creation of the Ministry of Communities was one that was done by this administration, and it was a strategic amalgamation of two ministries, namely the Ministry of Regional Development, Local Government and Regional Development, and the Ministries of Housing and Water. And it was the thinking of President Granger that these sectoral responsibilities or these portfolio areas are areas that impact directly on people's lives and where people live, namely the provision of water, housing, local government services, and regional development. So it was, as I said, a strategic move to bring together these two ministries and these areas of responsibility in an effort to provide a more holistic approach to the provision of these critical services via, critically, a decentralized approach to governance, which is, and a little later in the program, I imagine we will get to that, has been a central focus of the work of the ministry. But yes, to answer your question with regards to the water sector, again, in keeping with the strategic focus of this administration to concentrate on people's well-being, and of course, the provision or availability of, pure water is one of the central ingredients for human existence. There has been a renewed focus in this area. I am proud to say that the GWI in the past 4.5 years have delivered significantly on their mandate, and the primary focus has been on increasing access to pure water and improving the water quality, as well as providing greater number of hours of water. I'm advised, and I believe these figures are fairly reliable, that during the period of our administration, that somewhere in excess of 75,000 persons are now receiving pure water supply for the first time, and this has been throughout Guyana. The water program or the water sector is divided into two main sectors, namely the hinterland program and the coastal program. In relation to the hinterland water supply, and again, one of the strategic realignments of this administration has been, again, in keeping with the mandate of President Granger, to reduce the disparity between the provision of critical services for residents on the coastland, or the hinterland as opposed to the coastland. So there has been a renewed focus and a greater emphasis on the delivery of pure water to hinterland residents. Specifically in this regard, the hinterland water program has benefited in excess of $800 million during the period 2015 to now, to operate and expand the systems in hinterland communities. In excess of 20,000 residents have gained first-time access to pure water supply. The specific activities range from the construction of water supply systems as well as the drilling of wells in several locations. If I'm to name a few of the areas that have benefited from this first-time supply, I'll start in firstly with the Barima-Waini region. Some of the locations are Rincon, Coco, and Camwater. In the Kuyuni-Mazruni region, the villager community of Chinaweng is one of the beneficiaries, first-time supply. In the Pataro-Sipuruni region, the village of Princeville, villages of Princeville and Paramakatoy, and in the Upper Takatu, Upper Essequibo region, the villages of Aishalton and Sand Creek. In fact, just only last weekend, the Vice President Ali Koch, I was there as well, commissioned a new water supply system, an investment worth over $25 million. So, as I said, over 20,000 residents in the hinterland areas are benefiting from first-time access to pure water. It is an accomplishment that this administration is proud of. One of the guiding principles or philosophy of this administration is that no Guyanese should be left behind, and certainly in this regard, residents of the hinterland communities, we feel it is justified for us to place disproportionate emphasis for the neglect that many of these communities have suffered from in the past. As far as the coastal water supply is concerned, again, the achievements and the gains have been, if I may say, no less impressive. Some 60,000 residents are benefiting from first-time access to potable water. And some of the specific initiatives and projects, it includes what is called the WISIP program. It is the largest investment ever in the water sector, an investment worth in excess of $30 million US. It's funded jointly by a loan from the IDB and matching grant funding from the European Union. It allows for the construction of 3 new water treatment plants, one at Iflut on the Essequibo Islands, West Demerara region, one here in the Demerara-Mahaica region at Diamond, and the third in the East Berbice Quarantine region at Canefield. These 3 water treatment plants and the additional well that has been dug as part of that program is expected to benefit over 50,000 residents with an improved water supply, both in terms of quality, access, and service hours, critically. Overall, if I may, name some of the areas that have benefited from the extensive and expansive program delivered by the GWI, to name but a few, these would include Barnwell North, the Friendship Squatting area, along the Susdike Linden Highway, via Cabra and Kurukuru, Great Diamond, Timeri North. These would be, and here in Georgetown at Durban Backlands. Overall, for those communities that I've named, some 7,000 persons. Across the river, the residents in the Essequibo Islands, West Demerara, would have some 30,000 additional customers would have benefited from the improved level of service. Here in Georgetown, the rehabilitation of the Georgetown shelter belt is more than 50% complete, and that is going to, upon its completion, will benefit some 28,000 customers. Those are some of the highlights. Finally, I'd like to also mention that a new well has been drilled in the Port Morant area with a water treatment plant that provides improved service, in fact 24-hour service to the residents of those communities. These are some of the fairly extensive achievements that is to the credit of the GWI during these past 4 years, as they see.
Okay, thank you so much, Minister. Now we know housing is another resource that the government is very strong on delivering to the people. Only recently, Minister Ferguson handed out some house lots in various areas in regions 5 and 6. Could you delve into some of the developments in this sector as well, housing?
Yes, Stacey. Well, the housing program, which is delivered by the Central Housing and Planning Authority, has been given, again, a strategic mandate by President Granger, which is a roof over every head. That summarizes and encapsulates the strategic vision of this administration and as articulated or, promulgated by His Excellency. In this regard, I think I'd like to say that this administration, despite what has been touted by the previous administration, has inherited a very difficult hand in relation to the delivery of house lots or the provision of housing to Guyanese in need. In this regard, I'd like to refer to the fact that in the approximately 15 years preceding this administration, that some 55,000 house lots, quote unquote, were developed. But the statistics revealed that of that number, at the time of, in 2015, our accession to office, some 28,000 of these lots were undeveloped. What it speaks to, that's the figure or number, is that the emphasis seemed to be on the allocation of a house lot that was characterized largely by inadequate infrastructure or incomplete infrastructure. And despite the huge investment that was made in the limited infrastructure by previous administrations, the budgetary requirement to complete the infrastructure in those housing schemes that I've referred to, the 55,000 lots, was approximately 16 billion. That's with a B, dollars. So we were faced with this situation where there was a high degree of unoccupancy as a result of incomplete infrastructure. I am pleased to say that during our term, that approximately $6 billion, $5.7 billion have been invested in infrastructural upgrades in 31 of these housing schemes. Of this sum, approximately $2.9 billion was invested in road construction and upgrades, and a further $2.7 billion in electricity, the supply and provision of electricity. This would have allowed for several achievements, and among these would have been, apart from the consolidation of infrastructure in existing schemes, the construction of 10 new schemes, 10 new housing schemes. And these would have been the areas in Recdorzy, Providence, what is known as Parcel 123, in Numprel, Phase 4 of Providence, Peters Hall, a portion of La Penitence known as PP, at Amelia's Ward in Region 10, at Experiment in the Mahaica-Berbice region, on the Niming in the Pomeroon-Supernam region, and at Prospect here in the Demerara-Mahaica region. The more relevant figure that I'd like to refer to, apart from the investment in the upgrades in the existing housing schemes, would have been that the provision of new house lots in those areas that I've referred to in excess of 4,600. So the consolidation program would have allowed for a greater uptake in these lots, or construction of more houses in the areas that were already allocated. And very importantly, in addition to the continued delivery of house lots, has been one area of departure, a new policy area, which has been the provision of built units. And in this regard, I'm pleased to say that approximately 354 units have been built and sold to qualified buyers. What it meant is that the governmental investment in the infrastructure, instead of being invested in areas where there was a low occupancy and hence a greater per lot investment, that with the almost 100% occupancy in the case of a built unit, it justified the very considerable subsidies that are made by the state in the development of new housing areas. Again, Stacey, I'd like to say that the hinterland has not been neglected as far as the housing program is concerned, and they have been the beneficiaries of a hinterland housing program. There is a particular program that is co-funded by the IDB that is called the Sustainable Housing for the Hinterland Program. And under this program, some 270 families have benefited from grants to build a basic home. An additional 72 families would have benefited from a roof replacement. And these are in hinterland communities, in mainly in regions 1, 7, and 9. The approximate sum of $3.1 million was invested in this hinterland housing program. If I may come back to another noteworthy achievement as far as the housing program is concerned, it would be the fact that approximately just under 15,000 titles have been distributed in the 4.5 years. So works out to approximately a little over 3,000 per annum. It means that these persons or families have a legal instrument. It's the full proof of ownership, from which it's easier to secure funding, mortgages to allow for the construction of their homes. Equally and significantly, the length of time it now takes for the delivery of a title has been significantly reduced from what it was approximately 6 months in the past to now a little under 3 months. So the process of delivering these titles is much quicker. That is something that we are quite proud about. That is to the credit of the central housing. These are some of the key achievements under that sector. Of course, as in the case of water and housing, in the limited time available to me, it's not possible to go too granular in depth. I expect that the CEOs of the GWI and the CHNPA will be afforded an opportunity to speak in a little more depth as to some more specifics about the extensive works and achievements of these two agencies during the period.
Thank you, Minister. Now, under the Ministry of Communities, of course, regional development is also another important area on the agenda. Could you just also explain what has been taking place under that area, regional development?
Well, Stacey, as I said at the outset, the mandate that was given to the ministry by President Granger was to allow for the delivery of critical services via a decentralized approach to government. In this regard, we are committed to strengthening the role of local government organs. And in this regard, our 10 regional democratic councils, or RDCs, have been empowered to a greater extent to fulfill their constitutional role, which is not merely for the administration of their respective regions, but more importantly, for the development of their regions. I'm pleased to say that the central government investment in regional development has grown significantly by approximately a little in excess of 156% from what it was in 2014 to the 2019 budget. More specifically, the allocations would have increased from approximately $2.9 billion in the capital program for 10 regions to slightly in excess of $5.4 billion in the 2019 budget. Again, and significantly, our 4 hinterland regions have benefited to a greater extent than our coastal regions. The average increase in percentage for our hinterland regions, it's about 200%. And I'd like to give the specific numbers. In the case of the Burima-Waini region, their capital allocations have increased from approximately $273 million in 2014 to slightly in excess of $600 million in this year's budget, an increase of some 223%. In the case of the Kayuni-Mazruni region, that figure has gone from approximately $151 million to in excess of $448 million, an increase of 225%. In the case of the Patara-Siparuni region, that has moved from approximately $166 million to in excess of $394 million, an increase of 155%. And in the case of the Upper Takatu, Upper Essequibo region, from $307 million to approximately $535 million, an increase of 196%. Now, I'd like to say that, I'd give the figure of 156%. All regions have benefited from an increase in not only the recurrent expenditure, but significantly the capital program. And I'd like to highlight the fact that we did not bring a political perspective to the allocation of resources to our regions. Of course, our viewers would be aware that 7 of our 10 regions that the political opposition has a majority in those councils. I can tell you that the Essequibo Islands, West Demerara, which is not a region for which the central government has a majority, as well as the East Berbice Quarantine region, have been the two regions, coastal regions, that have benefited disproportionately. And those are not regions that are controlled by the administration. So we cannot be accused of discriminating against regions that did not support this government. And the investments in our regions have allowed for improved and increased access in critical areas of public services, namely health, public infrastructure, education, and of course agriculture. If I may give an example, all of the district hospitals now offer X-ray services as well as ultrasound. I'd like to single out the Bartica Hospital for the wide range of services that it offers and the amount of specialists that are located at that hospital, that there's hardly the need for persons to travel from Bartica to Georgetown to access proper medical care. As far as empowering our regions is concerned to improve their delivery of critical services, if I may cite one example, the limits for awards by the regional tender boards have been increased from $9 million to $14 million. It makes for and it allows for faster processing and award of contracts within the regions, and less bottlenecks that are likely to occur if all of these projects have to be sent to the national tender board for award. So these are some of the specific areas that this administration have rolled out to allow for greater level of regional empowerment and the more effective delivery of the regional programs and budgetary allocations.
Thank you, Minister. Now, since assuming office, the coalition government has done a lot to strengthen and improve the local government system. Could you talk a little bit about those improvements and the state of the local government system now under the coalition government?
Well, firstly, Stacey, I'd like to say that one of the things that I normally say is that prior to the 10th Parliament, we started work in January of 2012, following the elections of November 2011, that to speak about local government was like speaking a foreign language. It was considered to be, well, it was non-existent. It was just not part of the lexicon. And this is despite the fact that the system of local government is entrenched in our laws and in our supreme law, the Constitution. In fact, Article 12 of the Constitution, which has a mere 20 words, says that local government, by freely elected representatives of the people, is an integral part of the democratic organization of the state. Now, there's no ambiguity in those 20 words. It locates the system of local government as an integral part of the democratic organization of the state. So it's not peripheral, it's not an appendage of the central government. Despite that provision, and it's an entire chapter in our Constitution, Chapter 7, titled Local Democracy, which outlines the role, scope, and authority of local government organs. This system was consigned to irrelevance. The APNU, in opposition in the 10th Parliament, had placed this issue of the need for the reintroduction as well as resuscitation of the system of local government front and center of our agenda. And the record is there to show. So we came to office on a pledge or promise that if elected, this would be a principal plank of our administration. And it was not only out of, I believe, the clear recognition and understanding of President Granger as to the necessity of this system, but more importantly, the fact that it was there in our Constitution and that it could not be ignored. You've spoken of the system. Now, at the time of our accession to office, I think it would not be unfair to say that the system was characterized as being, on the one hand, undemocratic, secondly, dysfunctional, and thirdly, it lacked the autonomy for which it is given under the Constitution. In terms of the undemocratic nature of local government organs prior to 2015, I'd refer to the fact that local government elections were not held for over 2 decades, when the law requires that they be held every 3 years. Again, some 38 councils that were elected in 1994 were dissolved during the intervening period, and they were replaced by 38 what I call IMCs, or interim management committees, which are unelected bodies. They comprise largely of handpicks by the central government. And so we had place persons who were installed in communities to carry out the work of the wishes of, what would have been the Minister of Central Government. So the system was undemocratic. As far as the functionality or lack of functionality of the system was concerned, as a result of the pressure that was placed and the neglect on this system, the capacity of these councils had become so degraded that by the time of our accession to office, they had become largely dysfunctional. And thirdly, the Constitution says that at Article 74, that Parliament shall ensure that local democratic organs, which is what our local councils are referred to, shall be autonomous. This was not the case. These councils existed in form, but not in substance. They were largely controlled by the central government. We are pleased to say that we have, on the one hand, reversed that undemocratic character of councils with the holding of consecutive local government elections. The first being in 2016, or within 1 year of coming into office, where citizens' rights to elect candidates from within their communities who would become councillors, who would be empowered under law to not only manage but to develop their respective communities, that constitutional right was restored. And with the holding of local government elections last November, it marked the first time in our post-colonial history that consecutive local government elections were held as legally due. It is testament to the commitment and sincerity of this administration to ensure that the democratic credentials of these councils are intact, as being part and parcel of the overall strategic agenda to, as I said, reinstitute the system and to revitalize and to restore capacity. As far as the second feature that I spoke about, the functionality, following the restoration of elections and the democratic character, the central government via the ministry has invested over time in capacity building and institutional strengthening. The central government has also invested significantly in our local democratic organs, we have not only deepened local empowerment, or by the reintroduction of this system, but we have also broadened the system with the creation of 9 new local government areas, 9 new NDCs, and very significantly with the creation of 4 new townships or capital towns in our 4 hinterland regions. It now results or accounts for approximately 91% of our total population reside in areas that that do have a local government organ, meaning a local organ that has responsibility for the immediate conditions within those communities. In addition to that, this administration, in keeping with its desire to allow for less central government control, or the likelihood of that, and greater levels of empowerment, we are responsible for the establishment of the first local government commission. This was one of the requirements of the local government reform program that was identified in the constitutional reform process of 2003. So it took this administration to bring into being the Local Government Commission, which has responsibility for the regulation and staffing of local government organs. So it's the responsibility of a constitutional agency and not a central government ministry. It reduces the likelihood of central government interference, or worse yet, control. I'm pleased to say that for the first time in the current budget, we have introduced the payment of stipends to the leadership of councils. More specifically, there has been, on the one hand, a slight upgrade in the remuneration of regional chairs and regional vice chairs, but very significantly, our mayors are now receiving, for the first time, a stipend from the central government. In the case of our coastal mayors, it's $75,000 monthly. The hinterland mayors, sum of $110,000. The deputy mayors, $60,000 and $85,000 respectively. As far as the administration is concerned, the town clerks, $55,000 monthly for coastal and $78,000 for the hinterland. All NDC chairs, for the first time, central government stipend of $10,000, and for the overseers, $40,000. I need to stress, this is an addition to what was formerly paid to those officers, whether councillors or administrators, by their own councils. This is a supplement by the central government that I believe it provides invaluable support to those councils, and it will provide additional stimulus to those beneficiaries to aid and assist in, to have them more motivated, to be more focused on their critical tasks in providing leadership to their respective communities. The ownership, the empowerment that has been afforded by the central government, I think it is self-evident that it requires a level of ownership on the part of local councils or respective councils to be able to achieve the maximum gains. It is a bit unfortunate and somewhat regrettable that not all of our local government organs have taken advantage of this opportunity where they are empowered to lead the development of their respective communities. Some of the councils have been more reluctant than others. This may be partly due to the fact that a significant percentage, but in the case of our NDCs, 2/3 of those councils are, if you will, controlled by the political opposition, who clearly do not have the same desire or appetite as the central government to for citizens to be empowered. However, I think with the passing of time, those councils will begin to see the communities that have taken advantage of this empowerment, and which has resulted in improved management of their communities. Now, if I may single out the 4 capital towns, Bartica, for example, now boasts one of the most picturesque beachsides promenade, which is the Golden Beach Boulevard. It is one of the programs and initiatives that has been achieved to the credit of that council. There's been the development of a green park in Bartica, the rehabilitation of the municipal market, the installation of over 700 street lighting, and Bartica boasts of being the first green town. The transformation in Bartica has been nothing short of spectacular. It shows what can be achieved in a few short years when persons are given the opportunity to manage and lead their own developmental process. The gains made in the other capital towns are no less impressive. Mabruma boasts concrete roads from, traveling from the airstrip now all the way to the Comacca waterfront. There's been a green park also in Mabruma. Many other community initiatives, the municipal vending, the chaotic conditions that obtained at the Comacca waterfront will soon be a thing of the past. Municipal stalls have been constructed. In Madia, aided by the central government, the level of physical enhancement and improvement is transformational. Madia now boasts of concrete roads, and there's a greater level of pride among the residents of these communities. Let them, just recently, the Prime Minister would have commissioned the new internal roads, similar improvements in the area of lighting, improved. And, before we end, I'd like to talk a little bit about sanitation. But the point I'd like to make is that a sufficient number of councils have taken advantage of this new environment, this new partnership that has been created by the central government that allows for their own involvement and empowerment, and to play a leadership role in the improved management of their communities. And we see this as growing from strength to strength. And certainly we will not relax on our efforts come March 3rd next year. It is our intention to deepen this process in our second term.
Thank you, Minister. Now, as we wrap up the program, you said you wanted to touch briefly on the area of sanitation. Could we hear of some of the developments in that area, and what can we expect going forward?
The central government has invested somewhere in the vicinity of $750 million in the sanitation program in the 4.5 years, I think the most significant achievement has been at the Bosch. What we inherited was a dump site. We can cast our minds back to the conditions there. It was, well, it would be hard to describe. And in a few short years, as a result of the efforts of the central government, that dump site has been transformed to a modern, if not a model, sanitary landfill. The current contractor, at the time of the award of the contract, had made a boast that in a very short period of time, we would be able to go and have a cup of coffee at that site. And I'm pleased to say that they have delivered on that lofty ideal. And that level of improved management of handling of solid waste has been replicated in many other communities. And significantly at Bosch itself, during this year, a new leachate or wastewater treatment facility has been installed. Previously, the wastewater discharge was discharged untreated into the nearby drains, and it was a very environmentally unsafe practice. A new leachate treatment facility has been installed as part of the upgrading of that facility and improved management. The sum of some $200 million has been invested to upgrade what were formerly dump sites in a number of coastal and hinterland locations, these being Bartica, Lethem, Rose Hall, and New Amsterdam. I have visited some of these locations myself. The Bartica Council will tell you how proud they are, and the residents, the improved solid waste management. A few months ago, I was at Lethem, and the council there took me on a tour. They had pictures of what that site or facility was before. Again, no comparison. The transformation has been enormous. The central government has invested approximately $320 million to allow for the provision of tractors and trailers for each of our 10 municipalities to assist them with their solid waste management activities. So we have not only paid lip service, the administration, to strengthening the authority and the role of local government organs and local councils. The central government has invested heavily in upgrading the capacity and in as far as equipment is concerned, as well as investing in training to increase the human resource capacity of our respective councils. I omitted to say when I was speaking about the investment in our municipalities that the subventions, the central government subventions, have increased significantly by this administration. The increases as far as Georgetown, New Amsterdam, and Linden is concerned is approximately 25 to 30%. Significantly, in the case of Anna Regina, Corriverton, and Rose Hall, the increased subvention to these three councils have been 50%, 64%, and 64% respectively. Again, disproportionate. Now, those last three councils are not considered to be, the majority in those councils are in the opposition. Again, the evidence is there to show that this administration has not brought a political perspective to its obligations and responsibility. We tend to look beyond that and to look at the human needs and the human requirements. So these councils enjoy increased financial resources by this administration as opposed to our predecessors. Globally, and given the fact that there are 4 new municipalities, the annual subventions by the central government has increased from $86 million to $192 million. These are all irrefutable statistics that constitutes, if you will, the proof of the pudding. So we have identified a strategic agenda and direction, and the projects that have been delivered by this administration, the initiatives, the support are there to prove that these were not empty statements. We are proud of what we have done in these past 4.5 years, Stacey. In my visits to communities all across Guyana, but more particularly in our hinterland regions, where residents do not miss the opportunity to commend and congratulate this administration for the benefits that they have received. And it is on that basis that we are confident that these sentiments will be expressed at that upcoming national event in early March that will see the return of this administration with a hugely increased mandate. We look forward to that time.
Thank you so much, Minister. And as we wrap up the program, is there any Christmas message you would like to leave with the general public in keeping with the holiday season?
Well, I'd like to take this opportunity, firstly on my own behalf and on behalf of the entire staff at the Ministry of Communities, and if I may also, the 2 agencies under, as part of the ministry, the Central Housing and Planning and the GWI, to wish each and every Guyanese, heads of households and their families, a happy Christmas. I trust that your Christmas is an enjoyable one. Right now, unfortunately, there seems to be an increase in traffic accidents. I urge Guyanese, please be safe on the roads. Enjoy yourselves by all means, but do so responsibly. We need you in 2020 so that you can benefit, that you can be a part of this new economy that Guyana is going to benefit from. I'm referring to the emergence of the oil and gas economy. We need every Guyanese around at that time to share in the prosperity that will accrue. And have a happy Christmas, and we look forward to you enjoying a prosperous 2020.
Thank you so much for joining us on One on One, Minister. It was a pleasure having you, and thank you so much, viewers. This has been One on One.
Thank you.